Let's begin. Where's Josh? Okay, good. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Study Committee on Law Enforcement Compensation. I would like to begin with a brief statement and then ask Representative Josh Bonner to introduce our minister so we can open with a prayer. One of the primary functions of government is to provide safety and security for its citizens. We do this by having educated and well-trained professionals in our law enforcement organizations. The purpose of this study committee is to explore ways where we can offer career opportunities as well as opportunities for advancements for our professionals in law enforcement. We will look at the challenges facing recruitment and retention in our law enforcement community and explore ways to improve these opportunities. I want to thank the members in advance of the study committee and the presenters for taking the time out of their busy schedule to come and share in this important work. Thank you very much. With that, Representative Bonner, if you would come forward, we'd greatly appreciate your help.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Representative Josh Bonner, represent a portion of Peachtree City, and just wanted to say welcome to y'all. Thank y'all for coming to Peachtree City. Thank you to the committee for the work that you're doing. This is incredibly important work. Thank you for having the meeting here. I wanted to say thank you to Mayor Kim Leonard, as well as the City Council for hosting us today. This is a great facility. I'm sorry we couldn't all bring you in on golf carts, but maybe later this afternoon we'll take you on a tour. But we are very blessed here in Peachtree City and Fayette County to have some amazing law enforcement personnel. And we are blessed, and we don't take that for granted. And we know that we certainly don't compensate them enough for what they do. And we're fortunate that you guys are studying this. But this morning, I wanted to introduce you to somebody that is an incredible friend of law enforcement. The Reverend George Dillard is the pastor of Peachtree City Christian Church. And they just celebrated their 50th anniversary a couple of weeks ago. George was not the pastor that whole time, but they're an amazing church, wonderful part of our community here, and George also serves as the chaplain for the Peachtree City Police Department. So in that capacity, he has provided those services for quite a while now, and again is an integral part of this community. So at this time, I'd love to bring forward the Reverend George Dillard to open us up in a word of prayer.
Thank you for being here today and taking care of the men and women who protect our communities. And I've been serving as a chaplain for the Peachtree City Police Department since 1993 and served as the chaplain for the Effingham County Sheriff's Department from 85 to 1993. So love the men and women of law enforcement and appreciate everything that they bring. So let's begin this morning with a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you, Father, for all the things that you have blessed us with, life, liberty, and Father, we thank you for the men and women who stand in the gap between us and those who would disrupt our peace and our liberty and our pursuit of happiness. And so, Father, we ask you to bless the men and women who are first responders this morning, especially in the area of law enforcement. We ask you to give them wisdom and clarity and discernment. But, Father, we also pray for those representatives who will make decisions about their compensation and their futures. Father, we ask that you give them wisdom and clarity and discernment, that they might do the things that would communicate to those who serve us so willingly and so selfishly that Father, that we appreciate them and we know that they sacrifice every single day that they go on the job. And so, Father, just bless these proceedings and all the ones that will come after it, and let the decisions and deliberations be pleasing in your sight. And we give thanks to you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Representative Bonner. Representative Mathiak, would you like to say a word or two to our group?
First of all, good morning, everybody. And the first thing I want to say is thank you for all the experience in this room. It's really nice to see our law enforcement that has the experience that we've enjoyed in Fayette and Peachtree City. And I'm thankful for each and every one of you. Welcome to our committee. Thanks for coming to Josh and soon Stoney's backyard. We're glad to have you, and we're glad to have this conversation here. It is so important, and just like Josh said, I want you to know that we're about you. We want to protect you. So I'm hoping that that's what today will be, is a protection for those of you that protect me and our community. And again, we're just thankful, and I hope the conversations today are very productive. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Mathiak. And to the folks in Peachtree City and Fayette County, you've got two great representatives, I can say that. We're here because of Representative Bonner. But with that, what I'd like to do is go ahead and gavel us in. I think we have a quorum. I know that Representative Neal is on the way. She sent me a text, so she should be here shortly. And I guess the first one up is, oh, thank you. Courtney keeps me straight. Now, Mayor, if you would like to say a few words, where are you? There you are.
Well, thank you. Well, good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you for allowing me to say a few words of welcome to Peachtree City. I can't imagine, I'm Kim Leonard, Mayor as of January. I can't imagine a more important topic to the citizens of Georgia than the recruitment and the pay and the benefits and the retirement for our public safety officers. So thank you for doing this. We're glad you're here. Next time, maybe you'll leave a little extra time to discover life at 15 miles per hour on a golf cart.
Mayor, thank you very much. Cool. All right, the first one is Gabriel Carter from is going to speak to us from ACCG.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, fellow committee members, for the opportunity to present here today. Again, my name is Gabriel Carter, and I'm representing the Association County Commissioners of Georgia. Also, we have Todd Edwards here, the Deputy Legislative Director from ACCG. I'm not going to personally speak too long because you can see behind me I have some really special guests that I want to be the ones talking the most to you today. So I just wanted to start the conversation by saying that ACCG not only deeply understands the work that law enforcement does to protect our communities, we value the efforts that they undertake to make sure that we have safe communities. We just want to make sure that you all understood that ACCG understands that. And there's a strong connection between law enforcement and local government. And this slide kind of points out some of those facts. For instance, majority of the law enforcement, those employed in law enforcement or serving in law enforcement, do so at the local government level. And then out of all 159 counties, we have a sheriff serving in each of those counties along with deputies. And then we have 14 county police departments. A lot of our police departments are in the cities, but counties still do have some police departments. And then when thinking about county budgets, if you go to any county, you look at their budget, you look at it at a pie chart, majority of the section eating up most of that pie chart is going to be public safety and law enforcement. So there's a lot of investment from counties in making sure that there's quality law enforcement and public safety in the communities. And lastly, when it comes to the county perspective, counties have a constitutional mandate to provide this level of public safety through our sheriffs, which we're deeply appreciative of. They're the last line of defense. If cities decide not to provide any public safety, counties still are mandated to through the sheriffs, and they serve all Georgia citizens. So I just kind of wanted to briefly go over that. Next, I wanted to say that because we have this strong connection between law enforcement and local government, we are aware of the current challenges with retention and recruitment. And we're just really glad and proud of our counties because so many of our counties have taken proactive steps to increase pay for law enforcement. These are just kind of a handful of the counties that did that, but we have so many counties that have reported to us and that we've heard of that have increased pay for local law enforcement. And this is where I'm going to step to the side because we have county manager and some commissioners here to kind of speak to that fact. So I'm first going to introduce Commissioner Gibbons, who is the Vice Chairman of Fayette County, and I'm going to let him speak to that for a second.
Thank you, Gabriel. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for giving me an opportunity today to speak to you about law enforcement and retention especially, which is, I think, the issue we're trying to address at this point. I'd also like to thank all of our members of law enforcement, other members of the State House for being here. I have the utmost respect for law enforcement. I ran on that when I ran as a county commissioner. Just a little bit about me. I spent 27 years in the Army as an infantry officer. So never been a law enforcement officer, but I definitely understand the ethos, the dedication, and the commitment it takes to dedicate yourself to that career, and I want to thank you for it. If I could have the slide, please. Next one, I think I've got one in here. Nope, that's okay. So we have a slide, and one of the things we looked at last fall was the vacancies in our sheriff's office, as well as, how do we improve on keeping and recruiting the best folks coming in to our sheriff's office, because as I think everybody in this room understands, the number one requirement for a viable community in which to raise children is security. If you don't have security, you don't have anything to go with that community. All you have to do is watch the news every night. You can see who has it, who doesn't. Fortunately, we have it here in Peachtree City, where I live, and in Fayette County as a whole. And we have it because our law enforcement officers, our sheriff's deputies, our police officers, they are going the extra mile, working overtime to make sure that we have adequate law enforcement in this county. So as we looked at this, we started to address compensation, and I'll talk about compensation and what we did, but I'll tell you, members of the committee, that's only half the problem. At the time, our sheriff's deputies' starting salary was about $41,000 to $42,000 a year. We felt that was inadequate. We wanted to make sure that we could get our initial entry deputies to over $50,000. And so what we did is we realized that was going to entail a 19.5% increase in that starting salary. So we approved that. In addition, we realized that it doesn't make sense to increase the starting salary of a deputy to $50,000 or more a year, because then you might have a supervisor that makes less based on the pay scale. So we went ahead and increased the pay of all of our law enforcement officers and first responders, this includes our fire and EMS, by 19.5%. That made sure that we had fairness among all of our folks in terms of, I'm just starting out to I've been here for 10 years. That's important. Now, I'll also tell you, though, that, that's good. We've had it in place we approved it by effective 1 January. We've had it in place now for 9 months. We haven't seen a significant increase in recruitment. And I think the reason for that is because of, again, watch the news at night. So how do we address that? What are some other initiatives that we've done? Well, for the biggest thing, and as an infantryman, one of the things I know young men like to do is train and train hard. We're investing $5 million in state-of-the-art training facility here in Fayette County for law enforcement. We've got about $2.5 million we've spent so far. That's provided a shoot house, short range firing, long range firing. The shoot house is live fire capable. And in addition, we're going to spend another $2+ million to build a driver safety track, a driver's training track with professional instructors, because I think all of the law enforcement folks in the room will agree, one of the most dangerous things your deputies and law enforcement officers get into is a high-speed chase. So we're going to make sure that our deputies are trained to do that. The other thing that I'm pretty sure is going to happen is we're going to make that co-use. Because as I think all the law enforcement folks will agree, there's no way that thing's going to train every day. We're not going to be able to utilize it every day because Barry doesn't have enough deputies to keep on the street, as well as keep that thing 100% utilized. Based on my experience in the Army, I know it won't happen. So I predict that that's going to happen in the future. The other thing we've done is we had a recent situation, I think many of the local folks are aware of it, where we had a U.S. Marshal being assisted by our deputies who was serving a warrant here in the county. As the Marshal went up to serve the warrant, he was shot by the assailant in the house, and at that time we had no way to get it we had no recovery vehicle to get up there to assist that Marshal, get him out of the line of fire. As a result, Sheriff Babb came to us and said, hey, I really need one of these armored recovery vehicles because I don't want that to happen again. I need $350,000. 5-0 vote. That's the way we operate here in Fayette County. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would say look at, yes, compensation is great, but there have to be other means to address this. Training, I think, is just as important because young folks like to train and train hard. And then also, I would say, what are we doing along the lines of what I believe Georgia Military College General Caldwell's proposed? Bill is looking at something similar to ROTC for law enforcement. That, I think, is a phenomenal program. I went through ROTC. I would have never gone to college without ROTC. But something like that is a great program. Why limit it to Georgia Military College? And then also, Bill has not got the funds to do this on his own. It's basically, I think this is a good program, but, you know, it's going to have to be, the cadets are going to have to just want to do it. Well, you know, fortunately, when I went through the ROTC program at Auburn a million years ago, the Army was kind enough to give me $100 a month while I went there, and I had a scholarship. And some of us had partial scholarships. Wonder why the state couldn't have something like that at other state colleges and universities. If we've got a real problem, let's start incentivizing some of these young people the same way that the military incentivizes us to go through ROTC. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you very much for your time. Law enforcement officers, back to blue.
Thank you. And then we also have Jason Tinsley, who's the county manager from Upson County.
Thank you, Gabe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to catch up with you this morning. It's been a while. Great to see everyone here. A little bit about my background. I'm the county manager of Upson County, Thomaston, Georgia, for those of you that don't know Upson County. I've been there for about 4 years. Personal background, I come from a big family, and I have a lot of law enforcement on my family. So my baby brother and my baby sister are both police officers. So this is something near and dear to my heart as well. So, and our story is very similar to Fayette in some ways and very different. We're in the same judicial circuit, and in some ways, and in a lot of ways, we compete for a lot of the same talent. Obviously, our organization is a lot smaller than theirs, so our challenges are a little different. But along the same lines as Fayette, we too, over the last now 3 years, because we're building it into the 2023 fiscal year budget, it goes as follows for law enforcement. In 2021, 8%. In 2022, 15%. In 2023, proposed. And I know my commissioner here, Mr. Wilder, hasn't seen that 8% yet because we are going to present it to him next week. But that's what we're doing to try to keep pace. And I guess what makes us a little different than Fayette, we're not able to do that for the rest of public safety. But then again, we weren't having the same recruitment and retention issues as we were specifically in our sheriff's department. So just to give you an idea of where we were a couple years ago, in a sheriff's office of you know, a little over 30 sworn road deputies, we were down 7, and in our detention facility, we were down about 11. So for us, that's a really big deal, and sometimes it can be difficult to recruit folks to Thomaston when we're competing with a place like Peachtree City. Now we're growing, it's a lovely place to live, but obviously there's more amenities here, so there's potentially more resources, potentially better quality of life, I guess, depending on what you're looking for. So yeah, we offer a different lifestyle, but at the same time, we're trying to recruit out of the same pool. But I guess the message from Upson County is that we're also doing what it takes, and in my opinion, it's a little harder for us to do it, but we're getting it done. So with the support of the commission and with a lot of input from our sheriff's office, who we work very closely with, You know, we feel as though we're taking care of the needs of law enforcement in our community, making sure that they get what they need, because we have the exact same sentiment. I mean, these folks provide the safety and security for us. We don't have commerce, we don't have peace, we don't have quality of life without their efforts. And when we are unable to recruit them and retain them, we suffer as a community. So I think I want to conclude my remarks there. I know that the committee probably has questions, and so if you have any this time, I'll just turn it back over to Gabe.
All right, as I prepare to take my seat, I'll just kind of leave with these last closing remarks. We wanted to not only talk about the challenges, but give some potential solutions as well. So one thing that we recognize is that, to our knowledge, there's not a dedicated revenue source solely dedicated to funding law enforcement at the county level. So we would love to engage in a conversation with the state in terms of figuring out what that could look like in a smart way so that we're able to have those funds available to fund the essential component of local government, which is law enforcement. Secondly, a lot of the presenters at the last meeting talked about retirement, which is a big essential piece of the benefits package. We would love to partner with the state to figure out something that works. There's a lot of disparities amongst counties when it comes to what these retirement packages look like. And we want to make sure that all law enforcement officers are able to have a retirement package that they're happy with and proud of. Lastly, healthcare, which is a major cost at the local government level. We would love to have some conversations with you all as well about how we can partner with the state to provide quality health care to law enforcement officers and hopefully alleviate some of the burden of that to counties so that we can free up some funds to be able to fund law enforcement agencies and provide sizable salaries and benefits to law enforcement officers. So thank you all for your time. I'm not going to take up any more time. Thank you all for your time, and we're here if you have any questions.
All right, well, thank you, Gabriel. I appreciate your comments and the people representing the county. So are there any questions from the committee?
I have a couple of questions just for the two gentlemen that talked about in Fayette and Upson counties, what you're doing for your law enforcement and that sort of thing. How are you funding those projects? I know in Fayette County you talked about several capital projects you've got going
Right.
on. Is that being done through SPLOST or?
Capital improvement, and also some of the ARPA funding that the county received. So I believe and Steve is the money master, he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but half of it so far we have funded through our normal capital improvements program. I believe the other half, the training facility, is coming from the ARPA.
Yeah, we've got about $2 million of the ARPA that we've actually funded, the conduit to the fund balance, actually funding those programs. The 19.5% increase we did for all the public safety, that was for everybody that had a badge. That was actually funded as pay-as-you-go, so we used half our fund balance and then recouped it the next year through our fund balance. That's pay-as-you-go.
Okay.
So the majority of it's coming from capital improvements as well as our normal general fund expenditures. We were not able to do a rollback this year in order to make this pay increase happen. And at the same time, I didn't mention earlier, we gave all of our county employees a 10.5% raise effective 1 January this year. So with that, what we did is we were fortunate that because of his financial wizardry to keep the millage rate the same this year, but we just couldn't do a rollback. But that's how we funded the salaries piece.
Gotcha. Okay. Tim, what about Jason?
Actually, a little different for us, and I'm sure my commissioner can speak to the fallout. But for us, it was a millage increase, not being able to do a rollback, but it was the first millage increase probably in 10 or 11 years of any significant size. So, and yeah, that was a rough budget season, but we got it done, and we got out there early, and we took a lot of public input. And I think everybody knew what we were trying to accomplish, and for the most part, the community bought on. But obviously, as we got closer to having to levy that millage rate, it became a little less popular. But I think for the most part, we got some community support for it. We got obviously a lot less ARPA money than Fayette County got, and we used ours for one-time infrastructure projects, so we didn't build any of that into our operating budget.
Thank you.
Well, good. Members of the committee, I've got a couple of questions. And I'd like for the representative of Fayette County and Upson County to give me some numbers, and the numbers that I have is, have you got the sheriff's department, what their population is from each, and then what y'all's millage rate is for each?
Steve, I'll defer to you on that one, because I can't remember the millage rate off the top of
Gee,
my head.
thanks. We roughly have about 340 some odd officers, including the jail. So we have a pretty robust sheriff's department. Our millage rate, I don't have the exact calculation, but if you look at the 20 people we compare ourselves to, we're number 2 on the lower end of that scale. We've rolled back our millage rate every year with the exception of one since I've
I've
been
got it
here.
right here, Steve, I've got it on my phone.
there you
Mr.
go.
Chairman, with your permission, I'll go ahead and, I can give you exactly what our millage rate is, because I've
Thank
got
you.
the. Okay. Yeah, here we go. So, our general fund millage rate is 4.034, sir. And that, it's pretty low. That was what it was last year.
Gotcha. All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
And, Mr. Chairman, for Upson County, and I really should have brought that number with me, but I think we're hovering right around 100 in Upson, and now that's everyone at the sheriff's office, including detention and warrants and civil. And when we talk about the percentage increase we've done that for everyone in the sheriff's office, because really the recruitment and retention portion for pretrial detention has been the biggest issue. Still, we've had issues with post-certified officers, and then for us, our millage rate in the previous cycle, our general fund millage rate was 10.80, and then we just adjusted it this year, and I'd have to look it up, but I'll get it to Gabe and make sure that the committee gets it, and whatever other specifics you need.
Yeah, thank you. That's good enough. That's good enough. It's obvious that when you've got a smaller community, and these are just comments, when you have a smaller community and you don't have the, you just don't have the resources, and so the millage rate is higher. Thank you both for y'all's presentation, and I asked those questions so that we could get a perspective. And I appreciate y'all being candid, and I appreciate your time being here, and obviously for the elected officials, thank you for your service. Thank you very much. All right, Butch, Ayers, you're up. Reverend Dillard, thank you very much for those very important words.
All right, good morning, members of the committee, and thank you for this opportunity to appear before you again. I'm Butch Ayers, Executive Director for the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police. We were formed in 1962. We're out of Duluth, Georgia, and most of the travel today took me through Gwinnett County. A lot of stop-and-go traffic. It eased once I got to Atlanta. We have over 1,200 members, 606 are chiefs and CEOs. And what we do is we train. We provide training, initial training for all chiefs of police, as well as annual training. And we are initiating a new program with the Police Leadership Institute with the Gwinnett Municipal, or Georgia Municipal Association and GACP. And we also run the state certification program. So, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we had a survey that we had completed. We had 173 respondents at that time. We're up to 215 agencies responding. And this information is as good as earlier this week. So wanted to give you kind of an overview of where we are. Out of the 215 agencies that responded, they're authorized over 12,000 officers, and they're right at a staffing rate of about 76%. We have 54 agencies out of the 215 that are at 100% staffing. But there's a caveat behind that. Well, the lowest agency is 33%. We have 8 agencies under 50% strength. We have 59 agencies under 80% strength. But let's talk about the 54 agencies that are at 100%, all right? The largest agency has 11 sworn. There are 3 of those. The average size agency is 4 sworn. So typically, you have your agencies that are at most of full strength are from localities that are smaller, more rural areas. Let's look at the agencies, the 8 agencies that are under 50% strength. The largest agency actually has 800 officers today. The smallest agency has 1. And the average agency size is 110 officers. Looking at the 59 agencies that are under 80% strength, again, the largest agency there has 800. The smallest has 3 with the average size of 52. So take a look at some of these agencies. And the way we have this is we have the agency name, their staffing rate, and the percentage of full, and then their authorized versus the actual. And what these numbers actually, the authorized usually stay the same. It's the actual that is more flexible. And these are people that are actually on the payroll. And that's counting people that are out on sick, disability, vacation, administrative duties, or whatever. But just going through here from the low end, just as an example, Newton PD, 33%, and we just kind of start working our way up. Albany PD, large agency, 214 is at 61.7% of their authorized strength. Gwinnett, another large agency, authorized 909 is at 677 today. Then you top off at Sandy Springs in the metro Atlanta area, 98%, and they're almost there. So now we'll kick around and talk about some of the salary information that we found from our 215 agencies. When you look at the trainee level, we call this a non-sworn. They enter police work with absolutely no training. They're not certified. Your rookie officer. Across the state, the lowest level was starting at 25,116. The highest is at 58,5. Typically, you find that in the metropolitan Atlanta area. And looking at the information as we presented in our survey, the average was right around $40,266 for your starting pay, non-certified. Now you look at certified. Again, you come in, you already have certification. Your starting pay, the lowest agency was at $25,410. The highest over $61,000. These are just base pays. This does not include any type of incentive according to education, skill sets, and things like that. The average certified starting pay in the state that we found was $43,221. $48,000 a year for a job. It sounds pretty good. I'm not going to click on the hyperlink, but you know, $48,000 a year, all you have to do is talk to a tree. And I'm serious. There's a group out there dealing with wildlife and trees, and for $48,000 a year, they will send you 2 trees in pots. You place them in different rooms, you feed them, you water them, fertilize them, but only one of those trees you will talk to. And you will write it down in a journal, and you will blog it on a daily basis. $48,000 a year, which is higher than the average certified starting pay for a certified officer or a trainee. So again, we talked about the salaries that I presented. They don't include recruiting incentives such as educational pay. I know there are several agencies that will give you anywhere from 3 to 6% increased pay based upon a associate's or a bachelor's degree. Some departments will pay you additional money on top of the starting pay based upon how many years of law enforcement service you have, or if you have a different advanced certification, supervisory certification levels. Several agencies will offer moving and relocating expenses. There are also cities out there that are providing in-city residency stipends, and you're seeing a lot more retention bonuses. So we have to ask ourselves, how did we get to this position? How did we get to this position where there are more officer positions than there are officers to fill those positions? The delegitimization and demonizing of law enforcement over the last several years. Basically, it has resulted in perceived and actual threats towards law enforcement and their families. So what does that mean? More officers are leaving. If they can leave and they retire, then fewer people are interested in getting into this profession. And it's the classic law of supply and demand. You know, demand exceeds the supply. The cost of that labor is going up, and that's exactly what we're seeing here across the state. In the Atlanta job market, the job market for law enforcement is hyper competitive. I've been in law enforcement for over 35 years, and I have never seen it this competitive. You have agencies and you have jurisdictions that actually have the resources, they have the tax base and the finances, but they're competing with each other for those same few people. And what we see outside of the Atlanta metropolitan area is people, jurisdictions with less resources that are still trying to attract those same individuals that Atlanta's trying to attract. So what can we do? I think there's some things we could do that have a fiscal impact. Look at a minimum salary level. There's various retirement plans and enhancements that could be looked at. Income tax limits and reductions for law enforcement taxpayers. In other words, can there be income tax exemption for people that get their salaries from law enforcement? Something that the state of Florida just passed this year was an additional $50,000 homestead exemption on their property tax for first responders and teachers. But there's some other things I think that would be important, would have an impact as far as recruiting and retention, but it has a very little cost or no fiscal impact at all. Very easy things to do. Support law enforcement. Don't delegitimize the profession, and don't support false narratives. And with that, I'll conclude my remarks, and I will invite the next person up and I guess hold questions until you'd like to present some more, if that's fine with you, Mr. Chairman.
If that's okay with the committee, we'll just refrain till the rest of the presenters. Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate
thank you very
it.
much. I'd like to call to the podium Chief Alan Rowe. He's the Chief of Police of Valdosta State University, and he is the President of the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police. Thank you.
Thank you, Butch. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Much like my colleague from ACCG, I'm not going to spend much time at the podium because we have a list of presenters that are going to bring you some great data that I want to be able to yield most of my time to them. First and foremost, my apologies for not being at our meeting in Americus. I think we all understand schedules, and there was just too many things that I had going on that particular day. I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anybody in the room. We're in an absolute unprecedented time for recruiting and retention in law enforcement. I want you to think for just a moment about a particular scenario that, not in an effort to scare anyone, but is quite honestly not that far away. The 40th day of the legislative session happens. You guys are exhausted and need a vacation to go to the beach or go to wherever it is that you find your relaxation. You come home to find your house has been burglarized, and you call 911, and the response is, there's nobody to send. We are going to be there. in a few years if we don't figure out how to fix it. And I understand this is going to be an incredibly complicated issue because the issues the metro area is facing and the rural areas are incredibly different. You know, I commend the Upson County and Fayette County folks for being able to do that raise. I can tell you there is an agency in South Georgia right now that has an open positions at $14 an hour, and oh yeah, by the way, you provide your first set of equipment. We cannot continue to make people try to live at that wage and provide their own equipment. It is going to be a vast difference across the state. How did we get to this particular position? Obviously, we know pay and benefits does a lot. However, I truly do not believe we have a lack of people willing to do this job. We have folks in this state who have the heart to do this job. And they were willing to do it for the pay that wasn't quite adequate because that's the love they had. However, we now have activist DAs and activist politicians who are placing their literal lives and financial jeopardy and finances in jeopardy. The servant's heart can only go so far when you're potentially facing prison for doing your job. How do we understand that y'all can't fix it all for us. We have to fix our own reputation. We've made mistakes. I don't think there's anybody in this room that would disagree with that. There's mistakes been made. However, through certification and accreditation programs to ensure that our agencies are acting at the absolute highest level of service, we have to implement those as a mandate and not necessarily a voluntary program. With that, like I said, you'll see a lot of data about salaries coming up and different potential benefits. But I wanted to again remind you that this is a crisis we have to fix. We have to fix it quickly. And with that, I would like to introduce a personal friend and mentor of mine, GACP's immediate past president, Chief Janet Moon.
Good morning. Good morning. Y'all gonna cue me up? The reason I have a PowerPoint is to keep me on track. And they try to keep me, they've already told me, you've got 7 minutes max, Chief, so I had to really whittle this down last night. But Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you so much for coming to Peachtree City. I don't know if some of you came in last night, but if you can come back and enjoy our city at 15 miles an hour, we'll get you a golf cart. We have over 100 miles of multi-use path in addition to all of our roadways, which presents a unique challenge for us here in Peachtree City to police. I have 12,000 registered golf carts that run around the city, in addition to all the motor vehicle traffic I have, so we're a little different. Peachtree City, we're authorized a sworn strength of 68, and I currently have 8 vacancies. We're a little less than 38,000 in population, and our starting salary just went to $50,103. And Mr. Chairman, I believe our current millage rate is 6.043. I wanted to show you what's probably everybody sitting in this room that's wearing a badge, whether it's state, local, rural, metro, or whatever. The blue line represents our applications received since 2015. The orange line is the number we've hired. The number of departures is that gray line. As you can see, there's been a drastic decrease in just the number of applicants that are applying. So we're getting very few applicants for large numbers of jobs. We're actually talking to people that we normally wouldn't talk to because we would have vetted them through their application process. But now we're having to talk to people we normally wouldn't want to try to attract them. I really want to draw your number right here. This is a divergence point. If we all went back and we looked at our numbers, you're seeing I'm having more departures than I am hiring. And that number is continuing to grow. We feel certain in the future, if we don't do something to make adjustments to these impacts, this is going to continue to widen and this is going to continue the crisis. My hope today is I'm going to try to talk to you about the impacts of not having adequate staff is on your community. But look through the applications. We've had 39 this year, 15 we didn't interview, 3 certified officers withdrew from the process because they couldn't afford to take the pay cut to transition. 6 didn't show up for an interview. That's right. They put in an application. We said we're going to talk to you. Here's your date and time. They didn't show up. 6 weren't interviewed to not meeting the requirements, because there's basic requirements we want for our police officers. We have standards. 8 were screened out after the interviews. 4 didn't meet job dimensions. 4 were screened out due to post-investigations, prior terminations, prior arrest, and drug use. When you do your screening and you ask them when's the last time you used drugs, the last one told me it was last month. So when you decided to be a police officer last month, you should have thought about this a few years ago. And then 3, we were in the initial screening process. 6, we gave conditional officers, but never successfully onboarded. 1 failed the pre-employment psychological exam. I don't think my citizens want officers out there that can't pass a psychological or they can't pass a polygraph. We all well know if I can't trust you or my officers can't trust you, I don't expect my citizens to trust you. So therefore, you're not going to wear the badge. 2 were eliminated due to prior drug use disclosed during the polygraphs, because they may not tell you. Then when they have to answer in that polygraph, it's amazing what comes out of those people and what they have to admit to pass the polygraph. Believe it or not, I made a job offer on a Friday. I arrested that individual on Wednesday the following week for domestic violence. 1 certified officer withdrew. He was from New York. He couldn't afford to move down here and take our salary to come to the state of Georgia and work in Peachtree City. 4 that we did get to hire, 2 were certified officers from other agencies. I don't think necessarily it was our pay that attracted them. It was our high quality of life, the support we have of our citizens and our council attracted them, and our work environment. We definitely have a unique environment here than a lot of the metro area. And we currently have 2 in the police academy, in which those you know, we get them in the door. And I know we've talked about pay, and I'm trying not to hammer on that. I want to keep the certified officers I have, those 3 to 5 to 8 to 10-year officers, the ones that have the institutional knowledge. It's nice to dangle a carrot to get somebody brand new that's in and say, hey, come work for us. And then it takes 6 months, probably at a minimum, before they can even function as a solo officer. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with me on that. So you got to take care of the ones we have now, in addition to incentivizing those to come to your doors. 8 of our departures from this year, 3 went to other law enforcement agencies for better compensation opportunities. You know, when I was young and first started, and you see all these stripes, I'm old. I've been doing this for 37 years. I would have paid my agency to come to work. I loved it so much. I think when I went to work at Rome PD, I was making $15,000 a year, and I loved it. Couldn't get enough of it. But these younger generation now, they don't have that same mentality. They don't, what was that, live to work and work to live? They want to be off as much as they want to work. They want their quality of life and things that go with it. I would have cut my arm off to make $50 an hour on an extra job and would have worked all of them and drank all the Red Bull in the world to just go to all of them. I can't fill my extra jobs now because they don't want to work extra jobs at $45 and $50 an hour. So there's a cultural shift. 1 took a security job with higher pay and a normal schedule. Working 24/7, missing holidays, missing different things, take a toll on people sometimes. This is a 24/7. And yes, there's new applicants that come in, you have to explain to them, we're 24/7, 365. And then, what do you mean I'm not off on the holiday? I'm not home on Christmas. It's different. 1 changed a career field that had higher pay, and 2 officers retired. We have a wonderful retirement system here in Peachtree City that I wish I would have known about 37 years ago, because you can retire here at 25 years, which was really nice, and we get to continue to keep that. And unfortunately, I had to terminate 1. But according to a report by the National Commission on COVID-19 and Criminal Justice, violent crime increased 30% or higher in 34 major cities last year. More Americans are concerned about rising crime than any time since the early 1990s. We've just come out of COVID. We've just come out of 2.5 years of social unrest and a lot of other things. It was a perfect tsunami for what we're going through. The Police Executive Research Forum published an article on June 11th of 2021. They surveyed their membership and got 194 responses. On average, agencies are currently filling by 93% of authorized numbers of positions available. We can't get hung up on the average because we know that's just the average. There's some are way low, there might be some that are high, but this was in 2021. Hiring decreased 5% during that time. Resignations increased 18%, and retirements 45% increase. So they're leaving in droves, and this is on the national level. Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police did a 2021 data collection report. We had 254 agencies in Georgia respond. And on average at that time was 83% of authorized numbers. Our executive director just told you on our most recent survey of 215, it was 76%. Hiring, resignation, and retirements, we didn't collect that information in that report, so I don't have that number. Now, how does this impact your communities and public safety? Staffing issues among public safety have the serious potential for lowering training standards for law enforcement officers. You already heard how critically important training is, and training costs money. So what we're seeing are these 3 to 5, 8, and 10-year officers with all this institutional knowledge leaving for other things. Who becomes the next field training officer for your agency? Well, back in my day, you had to work 5 years before you could consider not being a rookie. But right now, we got 2 and 3-year officers becoming that field training officer, training the next generation of police officers. So there's a void there in that knowledge gap. Poorly trained officers are less able to provide the quality of policing their community expects and less able to develop strong networks within the public. And anybody that knows me, knows community policing is my heart near and dear. That takes a hit because when community and police partnerships decline, we don't get the information we need to solve crimes. Reduced community partnerships decrease an agency's ability to prevent and solve crime and lead to a decrease in public trust of law enforcement. I found it kind of ironic that during all the social unrest and everything that was going on, we keep talking about increased public trust and training and support, but on the other hand, they were talking about defund. Those don't go together. You've got to have the funding to do that. Community impact, the increase in response time. I know Chief Rowe, he's already discussed it. When you go, and I love my state partners, my brothers and sisters in the state, but when you go home and you call 911, if somebody is actively trying to get in your home and your wife or your significant other calls you and says, somebody's trying to break in, I need help, who shows up? Your local law enforcement, the sheriff's deputies, the police officers. What if that 911 operator tells you it's going to be a 15 to 20-minute response time? It's not going to set well, is it? We're lucky here in Peachtree City, we still have a 5-minute response time even for non-emergency. But we monitor that every month because that's critically important to our citizens. They have a high expectation of the level of service they expect out of us. Less proactive activities. Less community policing. Less building those partnerships, getting to know. I'm happy that I can look around this room and I probably know everyone, at least 98% of you in this room. We have a relationship and a partnership. Fewer traffic stops. Agencies having to decide what calls for service they're going to go to. We have departments now that will not send an officer to your home for certain offenses. If there's not an active suspect on the scene, things of that nature, you're not going to get a police response. They may send you to an online reporting. They may take your report over the phone call, but you're not going to see a polyester uniform show up at your house. And a decline in the quality of life for the citizens. It's critically important. Look what happened in these cities out in Seattle, Portland, when they decided the police weren't necessary. Look at the chaos that turned into. They found out real quick, even in Minneapolis, they need the police. This was an article I found that compared Atlanta to Chicago. Chicago is very more populated than the city of Atlanta, but what concerned me was the rate per 100,000 for murder in Chicago is 13. In Atlanta, it's 17. That's 30 miles up the road. And if you don't think those people 30 miles up the road don't come to Peachtree City to commit crimes, you're wrong, because they're transient. We all share bad guys. We all share them. Aggravated assault. The rate's 114 per 100,000 in Chicago, 386 per 100,000 in Atlanta. That's troubling. We saw the street racing going on in Atlanta. Atlanta's short-staffed. They can't handle things. My friend, Gwinnett County Chief, he was just on TV last night talking about the street racing starting there, asking his council and commission for an ordinance to address street racing. Well, what happens when they can't adequately handle this on a local level? We reach out to our support. We get the GSP. We get their crime suppression unit in to try to help us. Because that's not quality of life. few suggestions I have. I wanted to kind of approach it a little different. Y'all have heard about pay, you've heard about the pensions, but I think we can strengthen OCGA 35-8-22. We have a law on the books about reimbursement of training expenses by subsequent employers should an officer leave you within 2 years. We need to put a little more teeth into that. We spend a lot of money into training, and then to have another agency, for lack of a better term, poach them for a few more dollars cost the taxpayers a lot more money. We could also tie the enforcement of 35-8-22 to the post-certification of that officer. That if the repayment's not made to the local agency, post could put their certification in suspension. You've already heard these, a statewide pension plan for law enforcement would be a great help. Chief Mark Scott down in Americus down there, and Chief Letny will be talking to you. They're competing with agencies in Florida that have a statewide portable insurance policy and a little higher pay, and they're trying to keep them here. So it's an issue. Income tax credit we've talked about, additional homestead exemption, and just supporting law enforcement through the legislative process. When they came back after the George Floyd incident, we had 11 days, I believe, left in the legislative session, and the 21 bills that were dropped that were all anti-law enforcement. And then when it rolled around, the next year we had 130 bills dropped that were relating to police. We can't lose our qualified immunity. Nobody will do this job if we don't have qualified immunity and the things of that nature. So that's how the greatest way you can support us. We know on the local level there's not much the committee can do that you can for the states, but we're all intertwined. You know, if the state pay goes up, I lost 2 qualified, highly skilled individuals to GBI during the last time the state went up. So then everybody's playing catch up. I am grateful. I'm in the metro area. We do have this huge wage war going on. Being the immediate past president for the Georgia Chiefs, I've been able to talk to the northern chiefs and the southern chiefs. There's a vast difference. Once you get out of what I call the 285 bubble, policing changes dramatically. And we need to be helping our partners that are out there. Once again, I'm Janet Moon, the chief here in Peachtree City. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, but I appreciate you giving me some time to speak to you today.
Thank you, Chief.
I failed in my duty of introductions.
Yeah.
The next speaker is going to be Frank Kramer, the chief of the newly formed Stockbridge Police Department.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you all for assembling this committee and your time here today. And I want to thank all my colleagues and other supporters who've come out today to listen to the information being presented. I was fortunate to have the opportunity to start up a brand new police department. I don't know if some of you would consider that an opportunity, but it definitely was. Before I took that opportunity, though, I wanted to make sure that I had the support of the legislative body, that we were going to be able to at least be competitive salary-wise, to be able to provide good, attractive incentives. Otherwise, I would not have accepted that position because it would have been just as difficult for me to recruit for positions with our department as it is for a number of other agencies that you have heard from as well. There's been some discussion. The Director Ayers had mentioned that the largest agency that was currently 100% full staffed was 11 officers. And I was looking forward to being able to stand here before you and be the largest agency at 62 that was full staff, because we were up until about 2 weeks ago. So just in a short span of 3 months, we have already lost 2 employees. One of those was there's 2 types of turnover. There's regrettable and there's non-regrettable, and one of those was non-regrettable and the other one was regrettable. But we experienced the same challenges. We're very competitive salary-wise, but much of what you have heard, I listened to the testimony down in Americus and some of the things that have already been mentioned. Chief Moon actually stole a couple of my slides, so I will breeze through some of those things because you've already heard those, but I wanted to present a couple of different insights and just some different perspectives for you to consider as it relates to this challenge that we're all facing. All of us, as was stated previously, we are looking for good quality applicants to fill those vacancies. It's not just in the state of Georgia. We see this across the news, across our country. It is truly a pandemic. And as was mentioned before, this number has since decreased. With this 83% represented as the number of agencies in the state of Georgia that currently have vacancies. But we've seen that that's decreased by this recent survey to down to 75% of agencies that have vacancies to fill in their organizations. This is some data from the City Administrators Association that shows that law enforcement has seen the greatest decrease in the number of applications in the public sector. So we're leading the way there, and you've heard some of this data already as it relates to a recent study that was done last year by the Police Executive Research Forum that talked about vacancies, that talked about some of the hiring trends, as well as resignations and retirements. We've seen those increase significantly over the last couple of years. So the question is, why are we struggling to recruit and keep officers? And I think that you've already heard some thoughts that have been shared by our colleagues and others in the profession. And we are here talking about, this committee is titled Studying the Wage and Compensation of Law Enforcement. That obviously is a huge factor and a key variable in terms of being able to attract quality candidates. And we have seen a lot of calls to defund the police, but as has been spoken to already, I think that the solution to that truly is to fund our law enforcement agencies. We have seen, as a result of the call to defunding police, we've actually seen police salaries, mostly in the metro Atlanta area and across the U.S., actually start to increase, and in some cases, they're the highest that they've been in some period of time. It goes back to supply and demand and some other things that have already been presented. As an example, the Sandy Springs Police Department, you saw that they're nearly 98% full staff, but being the highest paid police department in the state of Georgia, they still have vacancies that they have to fill. Roswell followed the trend. You can see there that if you are a officer who has a bachelor's degree with 5 years experience, you can come in the door making $71,000 in Roswell. It's difficult for a lot of our organizations to compete with those types of salaries in the metro Atlanta area. Though my department is in the metro Atlanta area, obviously the salaries in the southern part of the metro Atlanta area are different than what you're going to get in the northern parts of the county or the metro Atlanta area. And what we see is we see a lot of officers that are going from department to department. We obviously have a shortage of officers, but they are taking their skills, taking their training, taking their experience to other agencies that are able to pay them better and to provide better benefits and incentives. Now, as was stated, we have seen an increase in the number of salaries. We have a lot of emphasis, a lot of focus on increasing salaries and compensation for law enforcement, and it's very important that we do have to do that. But despite those efforts, we still have employees that are leaving. We have officers that are leaving the profession for various different reasons. There's a lot of emphasis that we place, a lot of emphasis that organizations place on recruitment. It's very important. We have to get people in the door. One of the suggestions, and we spend a lot of money on recruitment as it relates to getting people in the door. And one of the suggestions that I had, and it was mentioned earlier about the Naval Junior or the ROTC program that's present in a lot of our colleges, and we see it even in our high schools. There was some information that I was looking at recently that said that the Army, 20% of their applicants actually come from the Naval Junior ROTC program that's in the high schools. And they are actually leveraging that program to attract people to fill some of the vacancies that they have in the military. What we have seen, and if some of you are aware of these programs, I'm not, I've done some research, but back when I was in high school, and I'm probably the youngest chief here in the room, there was actually a career center. So you had the opportunity that you could follow the traditional track, or you could go to the career center and you could learn a skilled trade. And one of those was law enforcement. So you go to the career center and you could get certified, get trained in law enforcement, and we've seen those programs go away across our state. There was a study that was done recently by the Department of Education, and I want to share with you some data from that. There's obviously a shortage in skilled labor, but they said that as it relates to the skilled trades, that 8 years after expected graduation, students that focused on a technical education while in high school had a higher median annual earnings than students who did not focus on a CTE program. So this is not a short-term solution. This is a long-term solution, but we have to do something to attract younger candidates to this profession, to get them before they make a decision as to what direction they're going to go in college. So this may be something that we look at. Again, there are not many states across the country that have these programs. This is a program that still exists in the state of Delaware, but this is a potential option that could assist us in the recruiting efforts. I can tell you, I previously served as the Assistant Chief of Police with the Georgia Tech Police Department. We implemented a similar program. It was a cadet program where we went and we did recruiting events at Police Explorer programs. We attracted young students in at the age of 18. We assigned them to an officer. They got an education out of that because they were working for the university system, and we invested in them during that 4-year period, and then we had a viable police officer at the age of 21. Again, not a short-term solution, but we have to do something because in our profession, unfortunately, we see it's a revolving door. I think the thing that we really need to focus on is retention. When we talk about employee turnover, there is a significant cost to losing employees in our organization. There are studies that say that on average, when somebody leaves your organization, you lose 16% of their annual salary in direct costs, which is the cost that you invested in interviewing, hiring, onboarding, and things along those lines. But the largest loss is the loss in production, in short staffing and morale, and the loss in job knowledge. And that's estimated about 150%. So if you look at this tangibly, I had some figures here. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Got to learn to work the clicker. Unfortunately, you can't see these here, but I laid this out for you in just for perspective, for context, using that equation. Every time an officer, based on a $54,000 salary, leaves an organization, that's $91,000 to $92,000 that's walking out that door in direct and indirect costs that organizations are losing. We'll go back to a little psychology lesson in high school here, and we all, I'm sure, are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And in order for us to be able to attract and motivate and retain people in our profession, we have to provide for those basic physiological needs. We have to provide a fair, competitive salary. We have to provide good working conditions. We have to provide good benefits. We have to do those things. But that's not why people necessarily get into this line of work. They also want opportunities for growth. They want opportunities for self-actualization and fulfillment. So we definitely have to focus on compensation because that's the first level of those needs there. Salaries have to be competitive. They don't have to be the highest, but they certainly have to be competitive based upon the region. We see that in the federal government. If you're a federal agent, you know that if you work in New York, you're going to make more money than somebody that's assigned in Georgia. So we have to be cognizant of those things. Again, to give you some context, we've been running in place for a long time. Prior to President Obama's 21st Century Policing Task Force, the most well-studied task force on law enforcement was President Johnson's Commission on Law Enforcement in 1967. And this is 1967. What they said in their report was that law enforcement salaries, their compensation, had to be competitive with other professions, other skilled professions that were seeking the same candidates. The average salary in the metro Atlanta area is about $48,730 by my calculations. Police officers are expected to be social workers, mental health professionals, mediators, and junior attorneys, and you can see what the average salary for those positions are in the state of Georgia, and our law enforcement officers are definitely well below that. As was mentioned before, our agencies in rural areas even have more significant challenges. I know that you heard testimony last week that there are, unfortunately, law enforcement officers, and it's really shameful and it's tragic that we have law enforcement officers who go out there and put their lives on the line every day that qualify for public assistance, and they have to use that as a supplement to go out there and protect and serve their communities. One of the things that I've picked up from this article here is we have to recognize that jobs that are unpleasant, that require higher skills, as with law enforcement, that are dangerous, they require higher levels of pay in order for people to be attracted to do those jobs. So we definitely have to start with compensation. Benefits, as was mentioned, is important also. I've provided you all, I don't know if you have this with you, but the National Conference of State Legislators had done a study across the board of retirement programs throughout the 50 states, and you have before you a summary of those plans. And I just want to share with you that currently only 12 states across the United States do not have a defined retirement plan for law enforcement professionals. As you can see there, Georgia is one of those states. So another way that we improve retention is supportive leadership. We can address issues with pay, we can address issues with incentives and benefits, but in many cases we still see people leaving the profession. One of the things that I wanted to share with you, this was a study that was done 2 years ago by an organization, Caliber Press. They polled about 10,000 law enforcement professionals across the country from various different ranks, various different organizations, and they asked them a question. They said, if you had a son or a daughter that was interested in a career in law enforcement, would you encourage them to pursue that? And I want to share with you here the data from that. Over 80% of them said that they would not. And so they wanted to explore that and understand why. Why would you not want your son or daughter to enter into this profession? And there were 4 key factors that were identified, and one of the factors was obviously safety concerns. We know that this is a dangerous job. Any job you have to put a bulletproof vest on to go out and do your work, it's a very dangerous job. The third highest factor here was poor working conditions. This was not just, this was working environment, this was pay, this was things along those lines. Another was a lack of respect for the profession, and we've already heard some of those things. The narrative that's being spread about law enforcement and the work that they do, but the number one factor was a lack of organizational support. When we talk about lack of organizational support, we're really talking about is leadership, we're talking about culture, and I was actually part of a study a couple of years back that the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police had commissioned to look at recruitment and retention across the board. And we polled a lot of people who had left the profession, and we asked them, what were the main factors that contributed to your departure, or what would have made it more attractive for you to stay? And one of the largest variables there was that supervisor relationship, that strong supportive leadership, the culture that they had there. They also wanted to be recognized, they wanted to be rewarded, they wanted to have some sense of growth, they wanted to be able to develop and achieve that self-actualization that we talked about. But of course, pay and benefits was also a factor that was part of that. Another thing that I just wanted to bring to your attention is that the National Institute of Justice commissioned a study that Rand had studied, or that they had done the survey for, and they were looking at the same issue, and this was across the country, and they identified 4 key variables that were contributing to the recruitment and retention crisis across our country. And they said that obviously the pool of other opportunities, there are jobs that are more attractive, salaries are higher, people can go into other fields that obviously are not as unsafe. And the other was compensation, which we are talking about here. But I wanted to just park on this for a moment, because one of the big factors that they found here was organizational health, it was culture, and it was leadership in those organizations. I know that it was mentioned by Director Ayers that the GACP is working on a leadership program. But really, whether or not people enjoy their jobs every day when they show up to every day to work, a lot of that is predicated on the supervisory team that they have, and being able to equip them with a skill set to be able to help people get through these difficult times and to provide strong supportive leadership. We have a lot of great programs throughout the state, but I know the training center is taxed. It's difficult to get our officers into supervision and management training and various other programs. I honestly think that based upon all the liabilities that rest on the shoulders of our leadership and supervisors out there doing this job, that we should have a requirement. We should have more opportunities available to cultivate those leaders in our organization so that they can address some of those long-term issues and other issues that are contributing to the exodus of officers from our profession. So again, I appreciate your time, and I know we have a few more speakers to get through. That's my contact information if I can ever be of assistance, and we'll reserve questions for the end. At this time, I'd like to call up to the podium Chief Brett Stenell with Georgia College and State University, who's also the Georgia Association of Campus Law Enforcement Administrators incoming president. Thanks, Brett.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my colleagues. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a very important topic. Speaking fifth, there's a lot of things that have already been said, so for the sake of time, I'm going to try and go through some of those. But I want to tell you a little bit about my story. What brings me before you? I was a student at Columbus State University, and in 2006, I graduated my undergraduate studies, and I needed a job. And I called a person who would be very critical in my life and said, look, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing. And he had a vacancy, and I started. For the whopping salary of $24,500, I became a Columbus State University police officer, a place that I called home for 13 years. And I watched this individual, my chief, the person who hired me, and who would, to this day, be a career mentor for me in this profession. He saved me, because at 24.5 back in 2006, my wife and I got engaged in 2007. I bought a house in 2007, and if it were not for this chief, I'd have lost my house. I'd have gone and I'd have done something else. I'd have found another job. I've been in this career I just started my 17th year. I'm in that group of individuals that is rapidly departing the profession. But it is my job now to be to my team and to be to those who we're trying to bring into this profession what my chief was to me. I'm now carrying that torch. It's my time to fight. It's my job to fight for them so that they don't lose their houses, so that they don't have to go to other professions. So as Frank mentioned, I'm the Chief of Police and Director of Public Safety at Georgia College in Milledgeville, Georgia, for anyone who's not familiar with Milledgeville. We're in Middle Georgia, about 2 hours away from here. Wonderful place. Would love to have you come see us. So Director Ayers presented some very tough to swallow data when he was talking about law enforcement staffing. And I'm one of those numbers. I'm one of those departments that's below 50%. So at full staff, I'm allocated 19 full-time police officers, including myself, and 3 part-time police officers. We're below 50% of our staff and have been for quite some time. What does that mean for a chief? What does that mean for a department? What does that mean for its administration? Well, that means I'm on patrol in order to help make ends meet. That means that a lot of our specialized functions have taken second chair, because at the end of the day, patrol is the backbone of any law enforcement agency, and we have to have officers out there on patrol responding to calls. So we have a lot of secondary missions. I know Chief Moon was talking about community policing. Where better than on a college campus are you going to see that? But a lot of the things that we want to do, we don't have the flexibility to do in the current day and age. So let's talk about salaries. I became the chief in 2019, April of 2019, and at that time, the salary at Georgia College was $32,115. Since then, in the last 3.5 years, the starting salary for a police officer is $40,441. We're very proud of that, but it's not enough. A lot of that is in great contribution to the cost of living assessment that the governor spearheaded. In addition to that starting salary for a police officer, every position in our agency, sworn, non-sworn, the salaries have increased between $5,000 and $8,500 over the last 3.5 years. But it's not enough. At one point, a couple of months ago, we were the highest starting salary for our county. It was amazing, and I knew we were going to see a change in recruitment. We didn't. I mentioned I'm below 50% of my staff. With all of those vacancies in the last 45 days, we have had 1 applicant. Not 1 person that I hired, 1 person apply. And I'll let you know how it goes. We're still in process on trying to see if that's going to be a successful onboarding. So one of the things that has been a theme with some of the other speakers is talking about that interagency cannibalism. We're stealing from each other. I hired an officer earlier this year, sent that individual to the academy, and they're currently on their 3rd department since January of this year because they're having different opportunities. As you see this happen with the changeover in law enforcement personnel going from department to department to department, if one agency in an area goes up, the other agencies are fighting to try and get that edge and maintain that competitive nature. So right now I'm number 2 in our county. Still not too bad. We're proud of that. We're not seeing the recruits. 1 county over from us, the county sheriff's office, I mentioned our salary is $40,441. 1 county over from us, the starting salary for certified officers is $50,000 with a take-home car. How does a college compete? How does my city compete? How does my county sheriff compete? That's the state of affairs in Middle Georgia. I want to talk a little bit about some impacts, as well as when Frank introduced me, he mentioned that I also presently have the privilege of serving as the Vice President for the Georgia Association of Campus Law Enforcement Administrators, which is an organization that represents not only the institutions within the university system of Georgia, but the institutions within the technical college system, private institutions, and I do want to highlight our HBCUs. All of those entities reflect our membership. So one of the things, if you were keeping track of time there, I became a chief of police 10 months before COVID and everything that came with it. And there are days where I sit back and I go, man, that was a lot to survive. But one of the things that I think is very important for us is that's the way things were. And I don't know if we're going to get back to that normal. So right now, this is the current normal, and we're trying to establish a new normal. And while we're establishing that new normal, it's got to be more than just thinking outside the box. We have to reinvent the box. And that's a daunting task for the committee, because not all agencies are created equal. Not all jurisdictions have the same challenges. All police departments, sheriff's offices, state organizations, they don't exist in the same environment. So on that note, after talking with some of our membership through GACLIA, the Georgia Association of Campus Law Enforcement Administrators, I want to show two examples of how things are different. Because the key thing that our membership said is, hey, make sure they know about the campuses. Because all agencies aren't always included in benefit reform. But one thing remains true. We've seen it time and time again. Let an incident happen at a school or a college campus. That's going to impact everyone in this room. It's going to make our jobs harder. We've got to protect that vulnerability. We've got to protect that infrastructure. So to these examples, under an FLSA exemption, law enforcement officers can migrate away from a 40-hour pay period to an 86-hour pay week, which gives a lot of flexibility for institutions and departments that are on 12-hour shifts. My department, we're on 12 hours. 12 hours is kind of the small to mid-sized institution and agency's way of doing more with less, because we can cover that gap with a little bit of overtime as opposed to additional onboarding costs with more full-time equivalents and benefits and things of that nature. So that's part of why 12-hour shifts became so popular. In addition, unless they're covering overtime, it's pretty popular with staff because they generally work 7 days each pay period. It's pretty good rotation. Those that came before me were talking about how time off matters. Time off matters. But all departments were not created equal. And one of our challenges is within the university system, we have difficulties migrating to that 86-hour pay period, which ends up costing us additional overtime costs that could be straight time costs. And there are some concerns. I won't bore you with the details. We can talk at lunch if anyone is interested. There are some concerns that are still being fleshed out regarding retirement contribution under TRS, especially on the short weeks. So officers on 12-hour shifts, they work 36 and either 48 if they're on true 12s, or if we have to modify for budgetary reasons, they're on 44. There are concerns on whether or not people are making their full retirement contribution on their 36-hour pay week. And there are representatives of the system that are vetting that out. We've got to look at issues like that and reinvent those boxes to make sure that we're attracting law enforcement officers, qualified law enforcement officers, to all facets of the profession and what we do. So I want to move very briefly to a couple of other thoughts and threats that have not come up yet. When we're talking public safety, we focused a lot on law enforcement, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention communications officers, 911 operators, dispatchers. We have some folks in those professions throughout our state that are making $18,000 a year. They play a critical role in what we do. That's generally the first point of contact for a citizen, whether it's on a campus, in a county, in a city. That's who answers the phone. That's who's telling us where to go. That's our lifeline in the field. And we need to make sure that they're not left out of those considerations, because they are a part of the public safety umbrella that is absolutely positively critical. Some of my colleagues have mentioned folks leaving the profession. I want to highlight a couple of thoughts there. Those that are leaving the profession are taking departmental and professional knowledge with them, and it's very challenging to replace that. I've had officers leave after 15 years to start a new career. Some have become teachers. Some have gone back to truck driving, which is what they did before they became a police officer. Anything but law enforcement. And it's very hard to replace those individuals. We talked a little bit about the cannibalism factor in robbing Peter to pay Paul, how institutions or departments are changing. A good friend of mine who I was his field training officer at a former agency. He works in a metro Atlanta area, and I asked him, I said, he said, we're short. And I said, you guys are short? I said, well, who's taking people from y'all? He said, no, it's not that. Nobody's taken from us. There's just not enough recruits to go around. Chief Moon, I think, highlighted the caliber of recruits and candidates. If I am not remiss, It was the director of post that said something to the effect of, not everyone should have the privilege of policing in the state of Georgia. That is true. I've seen their applicant packets. It sounds like Chief Moon has seen their applicant packets. I'm pretty sure every chief in here has seen those applicant packets. We're having to work harder and harder because we're scraping the bottom of the barrel of the recruitment pool if we're getting applicants to ensure that the caliber of product that we are putting out, the officers that are going into your communities, where your citizens are, where your students are what you would expect to see. That's a challenge. Another challenge we haven't focused on a whole lot yet today is burnout. Burnout is real. The officers that are working while being shorthanded, they're in this profession for the right reason. They haven't left for other things. They want to be doing this job, but this cannot be the status quo. GACP, the Georgia Public Safety Training Center, they have focused a lot on officer well-being, mental health, resiliency. That only goes so far. We're undoing some of those hard labors because we have people working more hours than they should. They're experiencing that stress. They can't decompress. They're not taking care of themselves. And if they can't take care of themselves, how can we expect them to take care of everyone else? On that note, I know at least in my jurisdiction, we're seeing law enforcement having to inherit other duties. We're playing a significant role in mental health response. It's not a challenge for this group to fix, but there are occasions where I can't get an ambulance. So you know who's taken to the hospital, depending on how critical that issue is? Police officers, because my department is less than 2 miles away from the hospital. And if we're going to be waiting 45 minutes on an ambulance, I've got an officer in the field with someone who needs medical attention. They're having to navigate challenges and waters that they wouldn't previously have had to do. That's the impact on other resources. We spoke very briefly on the cost of filling that void. So right now, if I were to hire somebody, the next academy session, I believe it starts on January 3rd, someone correct me if I'm wrong, which means that I'll have a trainee who's hanging out with me for a couple of months. We will do some pre-academy training, expose them to some of the security functions that we perform in our department, and then they'll go to the 408-hour academy with a tentative graduation date, if they clear, of March 24th. After that, they will go into their field training. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is something that I know has suffered in my department. We talked a lot about the importance of training. We talked a lot about the current normal and how there are these great pushes and desires for law enforcement reform and for us to do better. And I think it was Chief Rowe that mentioned we're not without our errors and mistakes. We want to build upon what we've done in the past and what we're doing now, and that is key in rebuilding that box. Is the way we were policing yesterday is probably not the way we're going to be policing tomorrow. These academy recruits, if I hire somebody today, they won't be in a patrol car by themselves off of FTO until probably the summer. There's a huge lead time on being able to get those people ready for the road to do the job that you need for them to do now. On the topic of training, something that we have all agreed upon is key. It's critical. If I need someone on the road, am I sending them to training? Probably not if it's not for pursuant to a necessary requirement to maintain their certification. There are elective things that we want to do with our staff, that we should be doing with our staff, that we don't have the flexibility for. And on training, I'm going to put it in terms that I know everyone can understand. Either we pay for it now or we pay for it later. And I mean that in terms of liability. Chiefs are being faced with having to hire people they wouldn't have previously considered, or running short. Chiefs are being faced with, do I put somebody on the road, or do I leave them in field training for another couple of weeks? Can we just shadow them? Will they be okay if we just shadow them? Those are questions that I know every law enforcement administrator in the state of Georgia is asking themselves, because we all have that common goal. We want to protect our citizens, we want to protect our communities, we want to protect our campuses. And if I can be of any assistance in doing that, please don't hesitate to call upon me for that service. Had a bunch of suggestions that have already been mentioned, so for the sake of time, thank you for listening. And it is my honor to introduce Chief John Letny of the Thomasville Police Department.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments to the study committee on the important topic of law enforcement salaries and a broader topic of law enforcement compensation and benefits. My name is John Letny. I'm a chief of police in Thomasville, which is southwest Georgia, as most of you know. Prior to service in Thomasville, I served as chief of police in North Carolina for over 15 years and served in a law enforcement agency in western New York for over 25 years. I'm also the first vice president of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, which is a professional association of over 32,000 members in 170 countries around the world. And it's from these varied perspectives that I provide comments today. The issue of recruitment and retention of police officers is a problem across the United States and beyond. The issue became significantly worse over the last few years, and most agencies are receiving fewer and fewer applications, as you've heard. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon for agencies to have a vacancy rate of over 10%, and in some agencies, as you've heard, more than 50%. This alone should be cause for concern, as it greatly impacts the ability of any agency to provide adequate public safety services and meet the expectations of their communities. Studies have shown that potential candidates have chosen other careers for a variety of reasons, and certainly compensation is a part of that. When I came to Thomasville, it quickly became apparent to me that police officers' salary was low, making it difficult for officers to pay their bills. Some officers took second jobs, while others worked as much overtime as they could, resulting in other concerns like fatigue and degrading work-life balance. With the support of our administration, the Human Resources Department conducted an in-depth study of police and fire salaries, which resulted in an average 30% or so increase. Since then, we have had an increase in applicants and been able to retain staff while reducing the need for them to enhance their salary through other methods. Yet we still have vacancies, and the pool of qualified applicants remains low. I right now have 7 openings, and I have 4 applicants. One of those applicants, as I was reviewing the package just last week, the applicant has more pages of criminal arrests than the application itself. So clearly, that is not a viable candidate for our or any agency. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average salary for local government police protection salaries rose 9.7% from 2018 to 2021. The majority of this change, 6.6%, occurred in 2018, indicating a significant slowing of salary increase in the ensuing years. And we all know what happened since 2018. A pandemic requiring significant changes in our operational methods, as well as an increase in calls for local law enforcement to take on a public health role in addition to their public safety role, as well as the current economic situation with a recession upon us or looming, depending on which expert opinion you consider. The Bureau of Labor Statistics' May 2021 report shows that nationally, state government officers earn an average of over $78,000 annually, while local government officers earn an average of about $70,000 annually, an 11.5% lower amount. Georgia lags far behind the national average when it comes to police salary. The same report indicates that the average mean wage of police and sheriff's patrol officers in Georgia is between $38,000 and $52,000, while the highest paying states are between $76,000 and $103,000. Of our neighboring states, Florida is the highest at between $64,000 and $76,000. Being in southwest Georgia, 13 miles from the Florida line, this significant difference has had an impact on my ability to recruit and retain qualified officers to serve our citizens. In addition to higher salaries, other states offer significant signing bonuses for certified officers and have simple certification requirements for out-of-state officers. While salary is trending up over the last few years, recruitment and retention has not. Young men and women have many opportunities for employment, and the negative narrative about law enforcement over the last several years, coupled with the potential peer and family pressure and the ability to enter a profession with better working hours, benefits, and overall support, results in fewer applicants, and frankly, some applicants who could not be successful in other career paths. Which brings me to benefits. 2 of the major categories of benefits are medical care and retirement, both of which you've already heard about this morning. Both are the decisions of the municipality because Georgia does not have a statewide retirement system. As a result, there is no consistency, and generally no portability between systems. Having good medical benefits and a pension in retirement is critical to recruiting and retaining quality candidates. Policing is hard. It's a physical job, and it's a dangerous one. We work hard, and sometimes we get hurt. And we need to know that we will be taken care of when we can no longer do the physical job of street policing. We have served and sacrificed and expect that there is a system to help us when we can no longer do the job due to an injury. Which leads me to the retirement system. I've worked in 3 states now, 2 of which have statewide retirement systems from which I was able to retire, and each of which had a system of providing medical benefits. Because of that, I was able to bring my experience to the state of Georgia to continue to serve in my chosen profession and hopefully have a positive impact here. Without a statewide system, not only is there no consistency, but there is a duplication of effort and an increase in expenses to manage the myriad of systems that create inequity among the professional police officers across the state. I have officers who, for a variety of reasons, cannot fully retire until they are in their late 60s. If they are in an administrative role, that might work, but as a street cop, working shifts, dealing with in-progress crimes and other emerging issues, that's just not realistic. Injuries increase, costing us in so many ways, but the impact on public safety can be significant. A comprehensive, realistic, and statewide retirement system is an important part of the overall compensation and management system for modern professional police agencies. And speaking of total compensation, we need to think out of the box to recruit applicants. Sure, the nobility of policing in itself is an important factor, but today's workforce is focused on more. They want fair pay, they want reasonable time off, they want flexibility, and they want other benefits. They see what is offered in the private sector and the gap in what is offered in the public sector. So we need to be creative and consider other benefits, such as tax relief, enhanced retirement options, and other overall benefits. These come at a cost, of course, but I ask, what is the cost of a public safety system that is not the best that it could be? I thank you for your time and your attention and your consideration of this important topic before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Before we move to the retirement center, do we have any more for the, okay, good. Before we move to the retirement system presentation, I know that there's several questions from the members of the committee, and I didn't know if any, perhaps as a housekeeping measure, maybe the chiefs that did the presentation could come up and sit on the front row, and we can have our members ask their respective questions. Do you want to go first? Sure. Representative Neal, do you want to go first? Yeah. Do you have some?
Let me go through my notes.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you. Work hours.
Okay, I think I'm going to start with Chief Moon, if you could come up. Did I hear you correct with a millage rate of 6?
6.043.
It's going to be hard to feel sorry for you. Just to give some perspective, and I'm happy for you. I mean, this is a great community to live in, but just to give some real world for the 80 of the counties south of here, y'all were able to do a 19.5% pay raise, 25-year retirement, $50,000 salary. The real world where I'm at, we have a millage rate of 2.5 times that, 14. But it gets worse. Y'all have a average income, median income of 48,000. My counties are 19,000. So you have a millage rate of 2.5 times lower and a average income of twice. So the tax burden on my citizens are 5 times. And I bring all that up because some of the suggestions when we talk about statewide doing property tax exemptions, I'm sure Fayette County could do that. Taxing, well, one of my counties only has, 2 of my counties only have 10,000 people. So doing blanket property tax. And I'm not throwing, listen, nobody supports law enforcement more than I do, and I think that's why we're on this committee. But just to give some realities for half our counties, because that's tough. Now, statewide retirement, that's different because it would probably be state funded. I love that idea, but we've got to be careful about that because to my friends with the ACCG, any bill that's dropped to do statewide, like one of the presenters said, minimum salary, is just unrealistic because here's what happens in reality. ACCG is pretty powerful to Capitol, not because of who they are, but because if a bill like that gets dropped, every 180 legislators will get a call from every councilman saying, why are you doing one more state unfunded mandate? So I think we need to, as a committee, we've got to separate statewide unfunded mandates versus what we can do. So all that's the bad news. Now, let's talk about the good stuff. Want to clarify something else you said, the OCCG rule of, you're saying now on the books, when someone poaches, they should be paying the training cost?
They should, yes.
But it's obviously not happening.
Sometimes it's a hit or miss.
Okay, so who is the enforcement on that? Because that's something this committee needs to be a top priority, I feel like.
I don't believe there's anyone in charge of that, which could also be an issue.
Okay,
That's
so
why
that
the
needs to be a
suggestion
fix.
of tying it to the post certification for that officer would give it a little more strength too. If we could place
Okay.
that in suspension, it might be a little bit more of an incentive. Some agencies also have the officer sign an individual contract, and then they try to go after the officer individually to recoup some of that money.
Okay, because I like that idea. But again, if we're not enforcing it, it doesn't matter. That's all my comments, except for the person that talked about the 100 and something anti-police bills. I can tell you not a single one of those was heard in committee, so
And we appreciate that, sir.
elections matter. I'll end it with that.
And sir, I hope we're trying to also, we know this is a difficult task, and we tried to outline at rural Georgia, South Georgia's much different tax base. That's an issue. And in the metro area, we do have some tax bases and different things, so we are very empathetic to our public safety, far north and far south, and we completely understand, sir.
I know you are, and I applaud you. Fayette County is a, I mean, that's why you are where you are. It's a mecca for people who can come here and want a quality of life and have a golf cart town.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Victor, do you have anything?
Just a quick question, just for clarity for our purpose here. Chief Stenell, you had mentioned earlier, just in one of your comments, in your role as the working with the association, about some of the organization dealing with TRS. Are officers in some of the university systems, are they covered under TRS rather than ERS? And do you know kind of how that's, what about technical colleges? I know private universities are going to be different, but the university system versus technical college, ERS versus TRS retirement systems, can you kind of explain that a little bit?
Yes, sir, sure. We are on a teacher's retirement system, or TRS, working as law enforcement officers within the University System of Georgia. As you alluded to, the private sector is a little different. There are a lot of different rules that apply to the privates dealing with their retirement and as well as training. They're not always eligible for state-funded training because of their private capacity.
Okay, so that covers the university system, TCSG, technical colleges, all the state higher education facilities. The officers are covered under TRS, not ERS.
I can confirm TRS for the University System of Georgia. TCSG, I'm very confident it's TRS, but it's evading my mind at the moment, sir.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. Clint?
Yeah, thank you. Just real quick, Chief Moon, you don't have to, you don't have to get up.
That millage rate you spoke of, is that the Fayette County millage rate, or is that a separate millage for Peachtree City? That's what I wanted to clarify. They have their own millage that's levied on top of what the county does, so that makes a big difference. So I wanted to clarify that.
So you would pay both. If you live in the city, you'd pay the city and county, just
pay the
like I
city
do.
and county, yeah.
Gotcha. So it's
Yeah.
closer to 10 overall, or I think someone said.
They said 4 or something, I think, for the county, and then you got the school on top of that that lives
Right,
another.
okay.
So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I understood that. Butch, I know, and I'm gonna ask you some questions, and you may not have the answers to it right now, but I'm hoping that maybe we can find this out to use this later on. All of the studies that you've done, and talking about the agencies that have a higher or lower vacancy rate, do you know, has there been any studies done, if there's any correlation as to which of those agencies have a defined benefit retirement or extra pay for advanced certification, intermediate certification, or bachelor's, master's degrees, that sort of thing? I know Chief Kramer, I think you showed a slide for the city of Roswell that had in there talked about a pay differential for bachelor's and master's degree. Do we know, or is your study, is there any way to correlate that to see which of those departments have those kind of benefits and which ones of those have higher retention and less vacancy rates?
Well, the study that we did not ask those particular questions, but I can certainly reach out and hopefully have some information before your next meeting.
Yeah, I would love to, I think that would be beneficial when we start looking at trying to implement some of these things down the road, to be able to show a correlation, to say, look, we're dealing with a lot of vacancies, and sometimes we need to have definitive proof to show people some evidentiary things, to show them to get them to understand why we're trying to do things. So I think there would certainly be a correlation with those, and I know that some departments that have defined benefit plans, I know years ago, the department I was with went from a 403B and a contribution plan to a defined benefit plan, and that made a very big difference. But unfortunately, I had already left when that happened, so.
Good.
I'm ready.
Representative Neal?
Thank you so much. Good to see everyone here today. I did hear a few comments. I did want to make an overall comment in reference to the culture and the environment that has been created around law enforcement over the past couple of years. I do want to highlight one of the things we have not spoken about, which is the bad apples. And so for me, being that I've been an investigator before and worked backgrounds in hiring and worked internal affairs, and I've been one of the ones that when you go to the lunchroom as internal affairs, you sit by yourself. That's just how it is. But through that, I know that the bad apples have created an ugly marketing piece that a lot of law enforcement has to address. A lot of it comes from a number of issues to include race. We got to make sure we're not afraid to address those issues through this process when it comes to trying to create a better marketing outlook for law enforcement. But I did think one aspect that I can't remember if it was the gentleman from the college or the gentleman from Stockbridge spoke about in reference to leadership training and retention and the recommendations for that. If that person could come back up, I wanted to know if you had any, because I think at one point you were speaking about the leadership training being optional versus mandatory, and I do feel that in my experience there have been a lot of issues with people just being in poor situations that just have terrible supervising and they feel so stuck and they can't say anything or do anything. But I do think training can assist with that. Do you have any recommendations on that?
I do. There's a lot of people in the room that probably know me. I also have a leadership consulting organization.
Okay.
And I did that because I noticed that there was a void in our profession, and it was something I think sometimes God tells you that there's a problem and that's a message to you, you might want to do something about it. And we have some great programs throughout the state. We have, of course, the Command College. We have a new program that the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police has implemented. There are various different training programs, but the unfortunate reality is that none of those are a requirement. It's a nice to have.
Right.
I don't know, there are many people in this room, myself included, that never received any leadership training, that never received any guidance before I was placed into a leadership position. And leadership is such a huge component as to the satisfaction of employees, but also ensuring that we have the right type of culture and the right type of environment. So that training is absolutely essential. If you look at it, and I think there are a lot of things that we can learn, there are a lot of parallels as it relates. We just look at the military as an example. If you are going to go along the lines and you're going to be an officer, or you're going to be in some sort of leadership position, you are given that training in advance of those opportunities. That does not exist presently in the state of Georgia as it relates to leadership positions.
Okay, one question I do have. Is there, or can someone get for me, the fiscal note that will be attached to increasing the mandatory leadership training, I guess, per year? Or I'm not sure how you would do it. Would it be, or what that cost would be for agencies to try to do that?
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
That would be something we would probably have to mill over and really give some good consideration to give you something tangible.
Yeah, 'cause to this point about unfunded mandates, it's great to say, hey, send everybody here, but there's a cost associated with it. I want to make sure we address that too.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. One follow-up.
I was just, this is not really a question, this is more of a comment to the panel we've had speak this morning, and also carries over to the folks who will be talking to us more this afternoon. I don't know if it's fortunate or if I've done something wrong somewhere, but I'm actually serving on this study committee and another subcommittee that's meeting out of session looking at service delivery issues. So for our local police and sheriff's offices and county and city matters, just a point that this is something that is a real concern to the state legislature. We actually have approaching this from a couple of different avenues and looking at a couple of different ways to try to help the situation. But we do appreciate what you do, and we recognize the sacrifice and the work that not only our cities and police officers do, but our sheriffs and our counties and the county commissions and everybody that's involved. The decisions we make at the state level have huge impacts, and in many cases, we don't follow those up with funding. We leave you to yourselves to try to come up with ways to do that. And so this panel, I know, is very cognizant of that, and I feel like our legislature as a whole is right now too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
I've got a couple of questions.
I got a statement that can help. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you, sir. In reference to helping with your staffing, two of the recommendations that I drafted this year is HR 201 for mental health operatives and HR 759 for public safety ambassadors to help with your call logs. Both of those are, one aspect will relieve your officers from having to send officers to mental health calls. The other aspect would relieve your officers from having to respond to non-emergency 911 calls to free your officers up to go to only priority one calls. So if that's something you guys want to take a look at, we have the models for it to implement to your cities and counties, because we've done it already the past 2 years. That's an option as well. And what we've been doing is reclassifying certain positions at your police departments that you cannot currently fill and giving those positions to non-sworn personnel to help your law enforcement agencies. Okay.
All right, thank you. I've got a couple of questions. And the first one is to Chief Rowe from VSU. And I congratulate you on working at the university, but what type of courses, we've been talking about recruitment, we've been talking about careers, what type of courses or career opportunities do they suggest at VSU as far as law enforcement is concerned? Do you have any information on that?
We are actually incredibly fortunate at our state to we're actually incredibly fortunate about our state to have partnered with our criminal justice program in-house. And of course, most people know that our university system employees are able to attend 9 semester hours of training at no cost to the individual. So we have mandated our in-house training program as well as a supervisor's FTO program, which goes to the point, again, like our Chief Kramer mentioned, none of it is mandatory. However, the individual agency, we have supervisory training in place before those supervisors come there, and that is all provided by our criminal justice faculty.
But I think more detail is, do y'all talk to your students in the criminal justice system and talk to them about opportunities in law enforcement?
Absolutely. We, of course, like to do it during the semester, so we get a little bit of first dibs on them. But you'd be amazed at the amount in our career fairs that specifically reach out to the criminal justice students, the amount of travel that distances agencies will travel to come reach them. We've had Tallahassee PD, Jacksonville PD, DC Metro actually was at our last one. So they're coming from across the country, but yes, we are constantly engaging with those criminal justice students to try to put them into the VSU hiring pipeline as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chief. Chief Moon, you displayed a wonderful passion for law enforcement. And my question to you is, why? Why did you choose law enforcement? Why was it so important to you? What was that passion, what was that spark?
It's an interesting question, sir. My mother still asks me that today. I actually signed up to go into the military when I was still a senior in high school. And I had aspirations of working with computers and those sorts of things. And then we did the ASVAB and was talking with the recruiter and went through. Military police drew me in, and I really don't know why. So then when I went home and told Mother, I said, I'm not going to be a computer scientist. I'm going to be an MP. She said, have you lost your mind? And she was like, Janet, why do you want to do that? And I said, I believe in servant leadership, lead with a servant heart, and I've always wanted to help others in the community I was in. I think that has helped me in 37 years not to become a cynic, and it's helped me throughout my career, and I just like to help others, and I'm here to serve. And that's the only real honest, from the heart answer I can give you, sir. I don't have the same day twice. I wake up every day. I still love this profession as much as I do today as the day I started 37 years ago. To me, there's not a better job in the world. When you can actually experience helping someone and see them change their lives is immeasurable. Or you see people at their very worst and you can reach out a hand and help them. It just does something to you. So that's my spark, and I try to instill it with my staff and my troops that we're here to serve, not to be served, and to do that little extra for people because it matters. How you make someone feel matters.
Chief, thank you. Thank you. I've got Chief Trammer, I've got another question. And y'all have all done a wonderful job in presenting the issues and challenges y'all face. But you mentioned something about a Police Explorer program. Do you remember that?
Yes, there's a program that's sponsored. It's actually through the Boy Scouts of America. It's a Youth Explorer program. I believe there's a new program, not entirely familiar with it, a Police Cadets program. It focuses on young adults between the ages of 14 to 20 who are interested in a career in law enforcement. As I mentioned before, when I was the assistant chief at Georgia Tech, we actually went to the various different Explorer groups and conferences because we had an opportunity to bring them in a position as a public safety officer, a non-sworn position. They got free education by virtue of working at the university system for 4 years. We had an opportunity to work alongside them, and again, when they turned 21, they were able to then transition into a police officer position. Not everybody has aspirations to move into, go to college. And that's why I think that the career technical education programs that we've seen gone by the wayside really be something worth exploring again in the schools. We see it with the Naval Junior ROTC program, as was mentioned previously, that we can get these young adults before they've sort of made up their mind. By the time that they're in high school, they're a senior, they've committed to a career path. And unfortunately, a lot of those are not interested in law enforcement, which is why we don't see a lot of enrollment in those criminal justice programs. But if we can get in the school, we can build those relationships sooner with our young adults. I think that we stand the potential to increase the pool of candidates that we have available to serve, again, in this very noble and honorable profession. But again, that's a long-term investment. It's not a short-term solution.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think y'all all see the gist of my questioning. It's going towards helping fill that pipeline. And we need to address it not only for the law enforcement community, but also from our educational institutions. So maybe we can look at it from other perspective. But I want to thank all of y'all. Y'all have done a great job in presenting the issues and the passion for the occupation that y'all have chosen. So thank you very much. I know it's, let me find out what I need to do here. Hold on. Ms. Courtney, do you think we should break for lunch, or do you think we should continue? Let's say that? Keep going? Okay. Well, then let's keep going. Then we're going to have the Executive Director, Jim Potter. Thank you for being here. Did I pronounce it correctly? From the Retirement System of Georgia.
Very close, it's Potvin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And the floor is yours, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for the privilege of addressing the committee and being part of this very important discussion. I appreciate that. I'm just here to sort of give a little bit, I believe, of an overview of what is offered by the ERS, particularly for the law enforcement community that we have as membership. As has been pointed out, we are not a state plus local. We are for state employees, and that includes the law enforcement profession. Just to give you an idea of who we're talking about the Department of Public Safety Uniform Division, so the troopers and the officers, non-commissioned officers. We're talking about the GBI officers and agents, the Department of Natural Resources, the Conservation Rangers and Deputy Conservation Rangers, Department of Revenue, Alcohol and Tobacco Officers and Agents, Department of Revenue Special Investigations Unit Officers and Agents, Department of Corrections Probation Officers, State Board of Pardons and Paroles, Parole Officers, and from the Department of Community Supervision, the Community Supervision Officers. In all, there are something like 2,600 active members in the ERS system that fall into one of those categories. As you are probably aware, the ERS has 3 distinct benefit tiers. The first tier is basically obsolete at this point. We don't have any active law enforcement members that are in what we call the old plan. In the new plan, there are about 1,000, and in what we call the GSEPs, the current tier, there are about 1,600, and all new hires from this point forward will become part of the GSEPs system. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a little bit. There are some special provisions for law enforcement. They're not uniformly applied across all of the different categories that I mentioned before. But the 2 basic ones are retirement eligibility at an earlier age than the general ERS membership. Our normal retirement for ERS is 60 years with 10 years of service, or any age at 30 years of service. The law enforcement members retain the 30-year provision at any age, but have a normal retirement age of 55 with 10 years of service. The other major provision is a disability provision, injury in the line of duty. Most of the individuals that I mentioned earlier do fall into this, and it's basically an enhanced disability benefit for those officers and other law enforcement personnel who are injured while actively on the job. The basic retirement benefit, and this would apply to the law enforcement community as well as the ERS membership at large, is for the GSEPs tier, the current tier, is a hybrid system. We are a pension plus 401k with a match. That makes us relatively uncommon across the United States. Most of the law enforcement plans that are out there are still pension only. And that remains true for the quote-unquote new plan members that are still in the second tier of ERS. But for the current tier, like I said, pension plus 401k. The sort of unique nature of the 401k portion of it is our match. Up until this summer, we had a pretty basic match. If you saved 5% in the 401k, you could get a 3% match, sort of a standard match that's pretty common. We were asked about a year ago to address recruiting and retention from a retirement perspective, not just for law enforcement. We're looking at our membership as a whole, but hopefully you all will see this as hopefully a help for you all as well. And that is
we chose to do that by enhancing the 401k match significantly. So now the maximum match that can be gained by somebody is tripled. It's up to 9%. It is conditional upon the amount of service that you have. So if you, once you're initially hired, you can receive a dollar for dollar match up to 5%, and then as you continue to accrue service beyond 5 years, the match increases until it reaches a maximum of 9%. That provision, as far as I can tell, is nearly unique across the United States, not just for law enforcement, but for all public pension plans or public retirement systems. I did a little bit of a survey of our kind of neighboring states. What I found mirrors some of the slides that we saw earlier. Many of those states do have some form of statewide law enforcement plan that covers some combination of state and local. The descriptions of who actually are eligible for it does vary somewhat by state. I'll give you some examples. In Alabama, it's firefighters, law enforcement, and corrections officers. In Arizona, it was public safety, correctional officers, and elected officials. In Florida, it's a whole gamut. The list is about 1.5 pages long of the type of positions that are available. South Carolina, for both state and local, it was police, coroners, peace officers, firefighters, magistrates, and probate judges. So as you can see, there's a wide range of examples that are out there. The types of formulas that are out there are just as varied. Some of the statewide systems have uniform benefits across all the membership. Others have variable benefits by locality. So essentially, they become optional benefits, and a locality, a city, or a county can choose whether or not to become a member of the system, and if they do, they have some discretion as to what kind of a benefit they want to offer. I would imagine that along with that comes some level of funding responsibility. But again, that varies across the states as well. Some of the states will actually carry some of that responsibility, but in a lot of cases, the localities also do as well. That can present challenges, I know, to different localities that have different levels of funding that are available to them, different resources that are available to do this. Many of the systems that are out there, they have multiple tiers, much like ERS does, and much like ERS has done over the years. What we call pension reform has really been a slow sort of contraction of the benefits that are available, making the recruiting, retention, hiring process that much more challenging for all of us. That's true as well. I would suggest to you that the increase in our 401k match that we had this year represents one of the few recent examples of an increase or improvement in a statewide retirement benefit. Many of the other miscellaneous provisions are pretty similar. All the systems had some form of death benefit, disability benefit. Vesting provisions range between 5 and 10 years. In our particular system, 10 years for the pension benefit, 5 years for vesting in the state portion of the 401k plan. A lot, like I said, a lot of examples out there. A lot of decisions need to be made. If I may make a comment or two about that, there are a lot of needs out there, a lot of disparity in the needs and disparity in the resources available. You want to design a system that has the proper incentives. You don't want any longer to be the system that is able to hire people in but can't hold on to them, and then they go spend the bulk of their careers somewhere else, whether that's within the state or across state lines. There are arguments for sort of a uniform system across all the localities. Is that feasible? I don't know. The costs would be, I think, fairly significant to do that, and we're certainly happy to support that effort in any way with data collection and et cetera. With that, I will stop there and be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Cool. Let's start on this side. Clint?
I could probably come up with a lot of questions, but just one I wanted to point out. You mentioned, and I caught it when you said it, you said that most of the state officers are eligible for the 55, retirement benefit 55 and line of duty disability benefits. And just to clarify, more so for others than for me. The Motor Carrier Compliance Division and the Capitol Police Division of the Department of Public Safety are still not eligible for those retirement benefits at 55.
Thank you for that reminder. That is
And,
correct.
and they don't have the same line of duty disability benefits, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thanks.
There was legislation that was introduced in this past session. It failed to pass, however.
There sure was. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Representative Neal? Nothing. Nothing? Nothing. And I don't remember if you mentioned this exactly, but we talked earlier about the retirement for our law enforcement that works in the university system and the technical college system, and I think that we weren't sure about the technical college system. Are they covered under the retirement system of the ERS?
They're not covered under ERS, no.
How are they covered, or are they covered?
I don't have line of sight to that. I'm sorry.
Okay. And then the Regents system, is that different?
Yes.
But
So
they are
there-
covered?
There are multiple systems. There's the optional retirement system, which is a defined contribution plan. There's also the TRS. So in the university system itself, you have people that are members of both of those systems. I believe they had a choice to do that.
Okay. All right, thank you. And if, you may have this information or not, I'm not sure, but as far as the ERS, it's 80%, 85% funded in itself? How is that?
Most recent actuarial evaluation showed a 71.6% funded
71?
ratio.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Are there no questions? Good. Thank you. Appreciated your presentation. Thank you.
Please
very
let us
much.
know how we can help further.
We will. Cool. Well, great. That was quick, and we're not going to be too late for lunch. Well, we'll just break for lunch and be back at 1 o'clock, if that's okay with everyone. We've got some box lunches here. Cool.